The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We're coming to you through the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, and can also be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring multidimensional healing. As our world has become increasingly compartmentalized, so have our healing modalities. In an attempt to specialize and focus on each area of medicine, our well-meaning medical system has unwittingly created huge gaps between the differing parts. Looking at a specific part rather than the functioning of the whole can result in disastrous oversights, as the whole is always greater than the sum of its parts. I've been going to the same dentist for years. I was very clear with the dentist and his hygienist about my familial tendency towards periodontal disease. The hygienist was very chatty. I sometimes wondered how she could talk so much and still pay attention to what she was doing. As it turned out, she could not. A tooth was becoming very sensitive to temperature. My dentist assured me the tooth was fine. Over time, the discomfort became more pronounced. I complained to him about the increased pain. He took x-rays and reassured me that all was well with the tooth. He suggested aspirin for pain and using toothpaste for sensitive teeth. A full-blown toothache drove me to seek out another dentist. He took one look in my mouth and sent me to a gum specialist. The specialist informed me I had deep pockets where my gums had pulled away from the tooth, exposing the root and developing an infection. He did deep scaling and put me on very strong antibiotics. But the tooth could not be saved. He sent me to an oral surgeon to get it pulled, after which I was given more antibiotics to clear up any residual infection. Shortly after, I went to the family doctor complaining of stomach aches. He gave me a strong antacid. I developed irritable bowel syndrome. The family doctor sent me to an internist, who gave me an antispasmodic drug. The condition worsened. I was failing to digest my food. The internist informed me that I might have to have part of my colon removed. I acquired food allergies. The internist sent me to an allergist, who took me off of wheat and dairy. The symptoms persisted and the food allergies increased. Soon, eggs and soy were added to the list. I started to feel exhausted all of the time. I went back to the family doctor, who diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome. He warned that if things worsened, I might need to go on disability. I happened to mention my worsening digestion to my chiropractor. He asked if I'd been on antibiotics recently, and I answered in the affirmative. He suggested that I might have a candida overgrowth. He provided a printout of the condition and diet to treat it. After following the recommendations for 3 months, I was much improved and able to go off the medications. My chiropractor suggested a cleanse to detox all the drugs out of my system. After the cleanse, all symptoms cleared. I was left with acquired food allergies and one less tooth. I counted myself lucky, for I still had my colon and my job. I asked the original dentist how, in spite of cleanings and checkups every 3 months, they managed to miss the pockets. "Gums aren't my department," he replied in a huff. I decided to seek out a more holistic dental clinic for my future dental care. To be fair, since then there has been remarkable advancements in holistic approaches in Western medicine, whereby it is recognized we must treat on all 4 levels, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, while keeping the whole person in mind. I'm currently a preceptor for the University of Colorado School of Medicine, where I provide instruction to medical doctors on the beneficial interface between shamanism and allopathic medicine. To say we've come a long way is an understatement. Unfortunately, the scenario I described is still fairly common in modern medicine. Treating the whole person is paramount, yet even today, the importance of the emotional and spiritual aspects in physical health are most often overlooked. Our guest this hour, Edie Stone, is a psychotherapist and a soul-centered counselor. She also teaches dream work and shamanic skills. Edie is a certified shamanic journey guide and a teacher of Peruvian shamanism. Her work has evolved from deep roots in mythology, dream studies, psychology, and spirituality into a tree with many branches, including interwoven themes such as Peruvian shamanism, Celtic spiritual traditions, trauma therapy, interactive dream work, and after-death communication. After this short break, I'll introduce Edie, and together we'll discuss multidimensional healing and the interface between shamanism and psychotherapy. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour, Amy VASTERLING, is an intuitive reader, international speaker, teacher, healer, and coach. Her website, www.intuitivepathfinder.com. Amy, thank you so much for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Thanks for having me, Gwilda. I'm really excited to be here.
It should be fun. You read energy. Could you tell us about that and what it means and how you use it?
Yes, I sure can. I am an intuitive or multisensory energy reader, and how I think of it is if you could read in another language, say German or French, you can do the same thing by reading energy. It's just a perception shift a little bit, and I've been able to do it since I was quite young, but really gained my skill in it as I have gotten older. And I use it to navigate my life as well as help other people look at their life from a vastly different angle and then help them create change through a whole host of tools. And I also can read from the Akashic Records, which is a little different than the other quantum field reading is what I call it, with the energy reading that I do. And then the Akashic Records is also energy reading, but it's a little bit different.
Oh, you just opened up a whole can of worms here. So
I probably did.
Have fun with this one. So would you mind telling me what the Akashic Records are and how that differs from normal intuitive reading?
Yeah, well, here's the thing with the Akashic Records for me. I wasn't trained to learn how to read them. And so my relationship with them is more of a feeling than a specific place or a defined how would I say it, something that I can define in a concrete sequential sentence. How I would say it is, if you moved your hand in front of your body, that energy is stored and remembered forever. And the Akashic Records to me is the memory of all and everything that's ever happened. So it's the history or the records of all things that have happened. And in the Akasha, the difference for me when I read from the Akasha is it feels very serious and deep, whereas normally I'm reading quantum field energy, which is, to me, linked more to the guide realm. That's my natural sweet spot. And the guide realm is very much about wisdom and play. So there's a very different feeling. My eyes feel differently when I enter the Akashic Records. I feel like I want to keep them open and look straight ahead. And the information that comes from the Akasha is very concise. It might be 3 words, and I can say the 3 words to the client I'm working with. And then behind that, I can give them paragraphs of information about how that syncs up to them. But it's just really kind of quick information, really concise. And the thing about the Akashic Records as a reader that's very unique is it is about asking a very succinct question. So my client might ask me one question, and with their permission, I would read and ask 20 more questions to get to the root of what they're asking.
Okay, so again, more questions. Questions
That's
beget
okay.
questions.
Yeah. That's good.
And you speak of the Akashic Records as a record of everything that's ever happened. But if time is really not linear, does it also record and hold things of what we would consider to be future events?
I believe so. I have not dealt with that too much. I'm mostly looking at people's present time and some future. But that's exactly right, is there that would have the wisdom of what is forward going. The only thing I will say to that is there is free will. So humans, and often when I read in the multisensory way, I will see in people's solar plexus an area where if I can't see what's going on for them and get the information, when I look at the solar plexus, I will often see fear. And that's where I, as a reader, don't look beyond that. I can ask them if I can look beyond that and see how they can work through the fear. But with things like that, obstacles, emotional obstacles, sometimes that forward going can alter or change based on free will. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that I've noticed personally when I'm working with the Akashic Records is it's so condensed, and it comes through me at night, and that's how I write. Okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, well, sometimes.
I
But
so understand that.
but
Cool.
it comes through so condensed that I'll write down, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and write down a sentence. And that's, a chapter or 3 in a book by the time I get done decoding it. And furthermore, it's inside out, upside down, and backwards from the way our language works. Have you noticed that? And can you speak to it?
Well, I love what you're saying, and that's what I love about the Akasha, especially in contrast to the type of reading that I actually came first to do the multisensory reading. That is very much nurturing and being there with the client. But the Akasha is so concise, and I think of it like a snake biting. It's just so quick and driven. And well, ask me again. I'm forgetting the second part of your question. You were asking about you get information in the evening maybe, and then you write pages and pages on it.
Right. And also I find that sometimes the information is like, even the language is backwards. I have to really,
and it's not for me. It's as though I'm having a conversation and the information comes forward in a very intuitive way. So I will get a 3-word response, and then I can feel into that and get the depth of what you're talking about, the breadth. You might feel into a sense and get the breadth of what's going on. And the full message.
yes, I am more kinesthetic, and now I take it you're fairly audio in the way you receive information.
Well, what happens for me is I tend to see it and then feel into it and hear it. But with the Akasha, you're right. It is more about hearing the response. Yeah, it's very different. And what people describe the Akashic Records looking like, my experience is very different. Actually, I see a very natural world when I go into the Akashic Records, and I don't see as much as I do here. So I think what I'm saying to you is maybe every reader or every intuitive would respond to it a little bit differently. And I always think of it as your strongest sense will be attracted there. So maybe my energy relationship to the Akashic Records is more audible, whereas my relationship to multisensory reading is more clairvoyance. It's more seeing. And I'm a very visual human, so I think those things sometimes shift a little bit, but it is more audible. Mm-hmm.
That's really a good point that you're making about how we all take in information differently, because what we're talking about here that you and I are both passionate about is empowering the individual. And so for them to understand that they're not going to see it necessarily the way you or I see it, what do you have to say to that for people?
Well, that's something that I teach. I encourage my clients to sense into, well, what I actually encourage them to do is about 5 minutes before they fall asleep while they're lying in bed, to ask themselves, what, bring me some information. And the reason I say bring me some information is you don't know how it will come. You might hear something in your ear, you might see something, smell something. And even if nothing shows up, I will tell the client to then challenge it and say, what does the nothingness mean? Because what I found is the curiosity to find it will allow it to come forward. It shows that you trust it, even though sometimes we get really strange information when we first start. The first time I did that, I can't even really explain it, but it was as though it was light, but it was this orange wave of light. And I thought, oh, that's kind of disappointing. What does that mean? And as I've developed my skill, I realize asking questions. Now I might think orange would represent creativity for our sacral chakra, and I might think, well, it's transparent. What does that mean? Am I being transparent to my creativity? I could build off of that information. So
Nice.
I would encourage, and I think too, if you hear something in your ear and it's shrill or your ear starts ringing, ask. Maybe you say, I'm a human. I'm hearing something in my ear. Can you bring it to my frequency? Just to try and see if maybe it's an angel. Angels can sometimes have a shrill voice, so to just be open to what comes and trust it. I think that's our most difficult thing, is to trust what we're getting, because it kind of seems strange and it's so gentle. It seems like, well, why would I pay attention to that? Look at our society. There
Yeah.
are billboards everywhere,
Yeah, talk about
right?
course, right?
Exactly. So
do,
that's what
do
I
you
would
think that
encourage.
do you think that we all have intuitive skills?
Yes, I really believe so. And I believe that everybody has it through clairsentience and claircognizance.
Would you
Clairsentience is,
describe those? Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Clairsentience is sensing, and it comes from the area where our solar plexus is, or that area that's, I don't know how to say it exactly, but squishy between our rib cage where it splits open. And we'll sense something. We might have a feeling inside that, I don't want to do that. And then, we sense through that and we find out, boy, it's good we didn't go ahead and do that. I even
Mm.
have a little story where my son was in the other room and he was quiet. He was about 4 years old. And my daughter and I were chopping up vegetables for dinner, and we both set our knives down and walked out to the living room, and my son stuck a key in the socket and got electrocuted. And we were sensing the energy in the quantum field. So the second part that I would say is this claircognizance, which is clear knowing. And this whole shift that we're going through really embodies the clear knowing. It's represented through our heart field, and it's about discernment versus judgment. So with the claircognizance, there's knowing. We might know as we're driving home from an event, and maybe three friends are driving all their cars, and we're all going to the same place, but each friend takes a different way. And one friend, when they get there first, says, where are my friends? And the friends show up and say, how did you know to take this way? That's the power of it, is we might know inside, well, I'm going to take the pretty way home. It just feels right inside. And when we follow that, we get the benefit of, maybe we felt chaotic energy on the highway, it's packed up or something, and we went along with what flowed for us. So just to backtrack, with clairsentience, I encourage people to ask that solar plexus area in baby steps, should I do this? And then if it's kind of this, it's a sound for me like an, no, kind of this stopping, to stop and not follow that or choose to do that. But if it feels like flow from that area, go for it, even if we get a gift in strange wrapping. And what I mean by that is sometimes when we choose something that feels right, it will look really wrong. But in hindsight, it will be something that was a huge catalyst for us. And then with the clear knowing, the heart field, maybe we'll go into this a little more too, but that is about the power also can come through speech with that. I'll give an example. I was going to Africa in 2009 on a business trip, and I had young kids at the time, and my husband worked full time, and so my friend, we were on a walk, and she was terribly scared for me, just like, how are you going to find help with your kids? You're going to be gone a long time, and, there's so much to think about. And I said to her, instead of responding to her fears, I said, I don't know, but what I do know is my friends and family will step up and help out, and I just know it will all work out. And because I'm clairvoyant, I could see this little shakedown that she did, which is releasing the resistant energy. And then she turned and looked at me and said, "How can I help?" Okay, so
Mm.
her fears went into this position of, I'm realigning with your energy of not being afraid and knowing this is for you and supporting it. So discernment is quite powerful.
It's amazing how when somebody goes through a shift like that, it literally changes the future outcome, doesn't it? You
It
know,
does.
we're going to have to take a quick break. On the other side of it, I want to go into the shift you mentioned. So, Amy and
Okay.
Amy and I will return to our discussion after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Previous broadcasts of thought-provoking episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Amy and I will be back, so don't you go away. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our special guest this hour is Amy Vasterling, an intuitive reader, international speaker, teacher, healer, and coach. And before we went on the break, I promised our listeners we'd talk a little bit about that shift you said we're going into. Do you mind expounding?
Oh, of course, I would love to. I believe in our world we're shifting to balance masculine and feminine energy. And what I believe was the precursor to this is that masculine energy was not conscious and feminine energy recognized it wasn't conscious and feminine energy knew it was conscious. So feminine energy stepped to the side and said, we will allow masculinity to wrestle out and figure out how to become conscious. And femininity will take the disparity of oversensitivity in this relationship. And so for me, how I see it is these large companies and all of the chaos that people are talking about or seeing in our world is moving to the hilt of the masculine arc of the story. And to me, masculinity I would define as being from judgment and mind, and it would be about A to B to C, linear logical thinking, whereas feminine energy is about the heart. It's about nurture and nourishing, and it's about following a pattern through feeling your way through versus thinking your way through. So as we're coming into 2016 and this year completes, we will complete the cycle of energy to elicit masculinity and femininity meeting each other. When I speak of this, I am not speaking about men and women, although what's happening right now, as I see it, is our societies are balancing out through men and women to come back to the truth of who a man is and who a woman is in our innate nature. To me, I now define a feminine or a woman as somebody who is alluring, captivating, and uses their beauty in themselves through a multitude of expressions. So beauty could be a child with a skinned knee, and that's a beautiful experience. The other piece, and the most important piece for women, is empowerment. And that's what I teach all about. And how that comes is this gentle communication where the woman is able to communicate what her needs are and be received through calm communication. We're setting a tone as women right now in our society. For men, men are to be strength and be adventure. And what's happened in society is women have been told, you be the strength. And that's taking the man's role away from them. And that's made things really confusing. So out of that, what I would say is narcissism is at the hilt. And the reason that that is that we're changing the belief structures and systems through the energy of what's happening right now. And as I see it in the next 2.5 years, we're coming back to the place where men can be in their innate nature, women can be in their innate nature. And because of that, feminine and masculine within each person, man or woman, will be within balance. Okay, I feel like I said a lot.
Well, you did, and it was all good stuff.
But I hope that that makes sense.
Yes,
To
it
answer,
does.
yeah.
Yeah, it really does. And you know, we're seeing as the astrological ages that this cycles in and out throughout the ages. We go into times that are more imbalanced in the feminine, in the Scorpio ages of Scorpio, and more imbalanced in the masculine in the age of Taurus. And then when we're looking at Leo and Aquarius, which we're moving into, are the time of masculine and feminine balance. And it's all just different lessons, don't you think?
Right. Well, and I do
Yeah.
think that. I also think that there's the reason we have so much chaos in our society is we're fleshing out old belief systems. And when we do that, we see kind of this arc of chaos before we hit what I call, so it's the myth, the old belief, the mystery, which is the chaos to try and find and establish the new, really true belief. And then the miracle, which is the final part where the belief is established within the individual and the other individuals around them can catch up to that new belief system. So, yes, I agree. And I think that that's how perhaps astrology or these other forces play a role, is to help us clean our clock, flesh it all out, even though I know it's not always fun.
Yeah, time to roll up the sleeves and get to work. I'd like to get back to helping our listeners with how can an individual start to recognize their personal intuitive skills? It seems like it's different for everyone. So what advice do you give?
Yeah, I would really encourage, the first thing is for myself, when I started really having it come in strong, it was in my 20s. And what I didn't know how to do is turn it on and off and work with it. So I'll tell anybody that's having a fear experience around getting information from the universe and receiving that, or however you want to say that, God, source, universe, that to not be afraid, but work with it. The fear is driving you to figure it out. And what happened for me, and I'd encourage this in everybody, is I realized, boy, if I set intention around this, I can turn it on and off. So my intention, and you're welcome to use this or come up with your own, is only show me what I can handle and only show me when I solicit. And I realize solicit isn't a very godly word, but that's what came. And it always has stuck, so that I didn't have what was going on in my 20s, which were premonitions, seeing things before they happened, coming in more and more rapidly until I saw one that was too much for me to handle, and I couldn't make sense of it. The other thing is, if you're a visual, a clairvoyant, that the information comes in metaphor, so it's not necessarily an accurate portrayal of what will happen. It comes in a story form. But I encourage people, like I said earlier, to, when that 5 minutes before you're going to sleep, ask questions because you're in a calm state. I also think noticing in children, if they are saying things like, I had a dream last night and then this thing happened, we dismiss that and chalk it up, well, that was deja vu, and it never really gets a good explanation for kids. But to say to a child, what did you think about that? How did it make you feel? Or tell me about that, and then just listen as the adult, to allow them to keep that innate nature open. We don't need to be afraid of it. I have met some very young children that are incredibly able, and they too need some support to understand it's safe and it's okay and they don't have to feel, because it makes you feel very different. That's another thing I'd point out, is when we are expressing on this at a young age, we can feel very different. And it's okay to feel different. What's happening inside is what I was just talking about with this shift, is we're way makers. We're changing the tide and saying things can happen differently. Life can be easier. We can feel our way through. So those are some things I'd say to encourage people to be open to it. There are many ways to be this multisensory. You can smell or hear or sense or know or see. And you can taste. I have never tasted, and I think that's kind of lucky. I know that sounds kind of sketchy. But and normally people who smell, it will be a very strong smell like perfume or smoke. My daughter, smelled a sandwich once that was absolutely not there. I've smelled baking bread before that's not there. These are just little messages. And then the next piece is push into it and ask questions about it. What is that bread smell? And then get a sense of what that feels. It feels like my grandma, or it feels like this or that.
Wow. What do you think stands between us and our intuition? If we've all got it, but few of us express it, what's standing between us and it?
Well, I think that part of the shift that we're going through right now, because of the arc of masculinity, that is something that said it's not safe. Can you imagine if a woman could come up to somebody? Well, even in the case of my husband once, I said to him, we were driving past the family farm, his family, and 2 people had died in the family, and I said, who will be the third? Generally, that's the case. And it hit me like a ton of bricks on my chest, and I turned to him and I blurted out to him, your uncle's going to die in March. And then that indeed happened. And I think that if particularly women, because it's a little bit more innate in our nature, we're able to do that, you can see that would become really scary to others. Well, how could you know that? How could you know ahead of time what's going to happen? And I think because of that, we've systematically shut it off. And through whether it's religion and I don't have anything wrong with religion. I think there's beautiful stuff that comes from religion. But like everything, it's a double-edged sword. There are some beliefs there that I think set in to be afraid of this innate ability. And so we're skeptical to trust it. I think the other thing is human nature. It's subtle. The intense voice inside of us is what rules us versus the gentle inkling of information that comes in. Those are the ones to follow. That is our intuition, and we tend to dismiss it, maybe because our society's so loud, or maybe because it seems at the moment like what just came in is of no consequence. So we're...
Yeah. How can a person tell intuition from triggering or from past damage and trauma? Because it seems like that plays in here from what you're saying.
Well, a little bit. I think more what I'm saying is the egoic voice inside, which
Okay.
would be the, to me, I think of the ego as when you're sitting down to do some focused work, the ego is like, you better get a cup of tea. Oh, now you have to go to the bathroom. Now, did you turn off the oven? Did you sleep under the rug? That kind of stuff. Versus the trauma is a little bit different. So I'm going to put that to the side for a second, but that we're trying to get ourselves settled down so that we can hear the peaceful, quiet voice inside versus the egoic that's trying to constantly kind of thwart us. I think with the trauma piece, I would separate that as maybe a third thing, which to me, this is what I teach about. It's to me about the emotional construct. If we weren't met emotionally as a child in even simple ways, we're going to have stuck energy within our bodies and in our selves. And what will happen is emotionally, we will start to judge ourselves and we'll fall into an emotional rut versus staying on, the gangplank of like, woohoo, life is great, let's do this. We'll get a little bit disheartened with ourselves or very disheartened. And then it's hard for us to actively manifest and see the potential of who we are. So I think of the trauma as a little bit of a different thing of emotionally falling in the rut by outside experiences. The ego is constantly at us. Yeah.
How much do you think the ego is tied in with all the distractions that we're exposed to? It seems like you walk into somebody's house, they got 3 or 4 TVs going, there's music playing, they're looking at their cell phone. How could you possibly hear anything past all that?
Well, and I think I would call that, off of somebody named Michael Brown, he wrote a book called The Presence Process, I would call that controlling and sedating through his words, that what we are doing through any form is trying not to deal with ourselves. We're trying to shut off that very loud voice in our head and do it through means of constant TV and hearing all these things. And if we see terrible things on TV, then we can go to work and talk about those terrible things and say, oh my gosh, I'm so lucky. But really, that's not our way to peace. Instead, stopping that and saying, I'm sending these people love that are having these difficult situations. And I trust that what they're receiving is something that is teaching and growing them and helping move forward. It's a positive, even the horrific things going on in the world. And we just keep that stream of love for that. I believe that's a much better way. I do think that the TV and media is sensationalized. I think it's very fear-based.
It is, and it's amazing how you just described it's not staying uninformed, but it's how we approach the information and how we make that energetic shift to send love and support versus engaging in the drama, trauma, and feeding it. Amy, we're going to have to take another one of those wonderful breaks.
Okay.
And on the flip side, we'll have more fun. Amy and I will be back after this commercial break. You're listening to The Science of Magic on the X Zone Broadcast Network. www.xzbn.net, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. You can always listen to previous transformative broadcasts on our website. Absolutely our gift to you, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Don't go away. We will be back. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka, and one of those people of service is our guest, Amy VASTERLING. She's an intuitive reader, international speaker, teacher, healer, and coach. Amy, this has just we've been having too much fun here. Would you mind telling us how we can tell what we're perceiving in our intuition is real, and we might just dismiss it as wishful thinking? How do you discern between the two?
Yeah, I think that the main way is to either write down what you're experiencing. And I set an intention when I first started reading for other people that in 6 months, 18 months, at some point after I had read for them, that they would come back and give me feedback to let me know how well I had hit with what they were, what information I shared. I would encourage you to do the same thing with yourself and say, I'm getting this information, and I've written it down, and I've written the date maybe to help out and track it, and then to ask the universe, show me how this all comes together, so that they can really start to see, I can trust this. This is information that is coming. It's a personal process to feeling through, I know that this is true, or I'm not sure about it, and then I usually, if I'm reading for myself and I'm not sure about it, I put it on the back burner, and I'll ask a day later, and if I forget the question, it probably wasn't that important, but I've put questions out there 13 years ago, and I still remember them. So I wouldn't remember them unless they weren't important, and maybe I'm not ready for the information. But I'll tell you, as you develop a relationship with yourself to ask those questions, you can just sort of hyperspeed yourself through life so that you don't have to wonder about a lot of these things. You can make decisions. And also claim-in points. Sometimes we are in a place lacking clarity, and really the message is always in the contrast, that we just need to slow down and not take things so seriously and not need it to be clear, but just say, this is where I am now. Owning that is a great way to invite more intuition to come in.
One thing you've spoken about here that I'm really a big advocate of is intention, and how it really directs not only where our intuition goes, but where our lives go. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think intention is really important. One of the major things, especially also talking about the shift that's going on, is the way out of all of the chaos is to, this is kind of a funny term, but to raise our own freak flag, meaning if we look at society and say, this is who society is, and these are their beliefs and constraints to what I have experienced, and here I am way over here, 3 miles west, and I don't know how to be who I am, and I'm afraid. But the higher we hang our flag that we think is a freak flag, it's not, but we be ourselves, what happens is we start to have people who hear our message and join us, and it narrows the gap in our society to bring that 3 miles to a mile to a half a mile, closer and closer and closer, until we get into this position where we realize, oh, this is just the message and who I am to bring forward. And so that is a way that we can really trust our intuition, get with ourselves, is to show who we are, express ourselves, and narrow the gap in society so that if everybody is operating off of more of an intuitive base, we're going to do better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense to me.
Okay.
And also, what do you think about? I found as I work farther and further into this, I just really don't have much of an identity. I'm just a person being, doing. Can you speak to that a little?
Well, that's the magic. So here's the deal. This is the premise I've come to is if we feel safe, we will self-express. And if we will self-express, we can come into fulfillment, which is the kind of the best friend of peace. And so what I'm saying is if we self-express and be the individual that we are, we will move into the collective and become so. So I'll give you an example, and this is kind of an extreme one, is Hitler. He was an artist. He made paintings of buildings. He said, I hate people. I will never draw them or paint them or anything. But he decided not to go back to high school or secondary school to get some classes he needed under his belt in order to go and study architecture. And everybody that was with him in art encouraged him to do that. He didn't, so he stifled his self-expression. And look at what came out of that. This extreme control came out of him. Can you imagine had he fulfilled, gone back and been humble, taken the classes, gone forward and been an architect? Can you imagine the very different results?
Yeah, it'd be amazing, wouldn't it? Before we get too much further, I want you to please share with what services you offer and where people can find them.
Yeah, Gwilda, thank you. Yep, I have a website that's Intuitive Pathfinder, it's all one word, .com. And you're welcome to peruse all the things I offer on there. I have a speaker series that I offer every other month on an energetic theme. Those are also offered as MP3s that you can purchase online, so you don't have to be where I am to receive those. I do Akashic Records readings once a month, and I also do intuitive readings, which are really nurturing-based in the way of giving you tools to help you catch up to your own level of spirituality. I think of it as I'll be the jet fuel to get your airplane off the ground, and then you go fly. I really have a determined sense inside of me to see people thrive. And I also offer groups that cycle for 1 year together. They're women's labyrinths, and the idea is that the women spend time connecting, building a community and a network, and that they settle themselves down to really trust their intuition and that inner guidance and voice, and gain clarity about career, love, relationships, and just self, kind of their world of their self. Over that course of the year, those are online groups, and I'll be starting one in January of 2017, so you can also see about that on my website.
Perfect. Beautiful, beautiful provisions, and thank you for offering them. Do you see us coming together as community as very important at this time, and if so, why?
I do, but I don't think that we're ready for it. I think the individual is still wrestling out of their own fear and the energy experience, kind of our trauma, our past, and our lineage, and that we will in time come forward. I think a lot of people right now are wanting, and what I see as a reader in that wanting is they actually are wanting their people. They aren't wanting something. They want to be with those people that are going to move them the furthest, or that they're there to teach and be of service to. And that once we get into those spots where we're really with our people, more and more as a vast majority of society, we will find an astounding level of community.
It's amazing. And don't you think that what one person can do, but if we combine our intuition and our way of living and our way of reframing things with members of our community, that we can come up with a larger picture of truth?
Yes, absolutely.
And how far out in the future do you see that as happening?
Well, I think it will take generations to really get to this sweet spot of changing all the energy that's happening now. But I do think we see hallmarks of things changing. Like right now, since April, women have been quite focused on being the adult woman that they came here to be. And that pattern is shifting, which is creating a lot of, I'm going to just say distress. I don't really want to use that word, but in love relationships to wrestle out and move the way forward. So I think it's in small ways, it's right there. But for me, I think until about 2.5 years from now, we will be at a much more balanced point in each of us. I also see there are 3 soul groups that I can identify, and they are going through this change and awakening. And all of a sudden, just a few weeks ago, I saw 3 more, 6 more, 9 more, 12 more. All of the groups that are coming after these to slowly shift into this. So I think it's just going to be an evolution, and hopefully in my kids' time, as I pass on, they'll see the full fruition of what's happening. But I do think in the coming years we're going to see a lot more balance in our country, of the United States, and in our society. It will settle down.
That's such a hopeful message, because right now we are entering into chaos, and we do have to enter into chaos to break up the old structure before we can reestablish a new. Is that what you're talking about?
It is, and that we're at the kind of the hilt of some chaos to bring it back to it's rebalancing itself. Well, I think of it like childbirth. At the very end of birthing a baby, there's extraordinary pain, and you push into the pain. And why you do that, I don't know, but your instinct is to do so. We're doing the same thing. We're birthing something massive.
And it's happening in our individual lives as well as in the lives of society. I mean, there's chaos going on, and we just need to move through that personally as well as en masse, don't you believe?
Absolutely. And there are many, many layers to it, like you're saying. There's the personal layer, and there's the layer of our society, and then there's a layer of our country or our state or our world, or, so absolutely.
And it's so important, don't you think, to embrace the dissolution so that we can create what we want.
Yes. Yep. We do. We need to meet it within ourselves, I believe, first, and say, what we intend, and stick with that.
And do you see truth evolving during this time as well?
I do. I think it's already there. I think truth always existed. I particularly think that truth is so embedded in these wayfinders, the people who might feel different or be very sensitive in our society, and that they are confused because they don't necessarily sync up very well with the masculine model that's current of these large companies, and that one person's on the top and then there are all these people that trickle down. I think that they're much more in harmony with this altruistic, cohesive work environment where you use your best skills. And I do see that, actually. There is a corporation in the Twin Cities whose CEO has sent out
Amy, I'm sorry. We're going to have to do this again because time flies and we're out of it.
Oh, Gwilda, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Amy. Our guest this hour has been Amy VASTERLING, an intuitive reader, international speaker, teacher, healer, and coach. Her website, www.intuitivepathfinder.com. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, Our Gift to You. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge and comforted with love on your path to sovereignty. Find us at www.thescienceofmagic.net.